Carl Seville here, and today we're going to talk about my 4 STEM resources. First, I have my book, Apollo 8, The Thrilling Story of the First Mission to the Moon. It's not just about Apollo 8. It starts out talking about the early space program, the Gemini and the Mercury missions. Talks about the formation of NACA and NASA, which were both created because sort of like with STEM today, the United States was falling behind the rest of the world in avionics, and then later with Russia sending cosmonauts into space before America, and it goes into the story of Apollo 8. I'm about halfway through the book, so I haven't quite finished it, but it does a really great job. It talks a little bit about the technical aspect, really get to know the people it's talking about, the astronauts as well as some of the engineers, the problem solving that they went through on the process, which I guess leads into, I had a couple choices, but I went with Apollo 13 for my favorite movie because it kind of followed the Apollo 8 theme that I was going with here. And I pointed out here 2 of my favorite quotes. If you search on YouTube, the videos are there. Failure is not an option, and a square peg in a round hole. Just the movie talks about some of the problem solving, some of the stuff that they had to go through when Apollo 13 had its problems in space. Failure is not an option. They realized that the batteries weren't going to last long enough, so they had to figure out how do we cut power but still keep them alive. And the square peg in the round hole is one of my favorite scenes from any movie, where they just throw boxes of materials on the table and said, there's a carbon dioxide buildup. We need to make this filter work with this filter, and it's literally a square peg in a round hole, and you had to solve the problem using just what was in front of you. I did notice going back to the movie, that there really is not a lot of diversity at all in the movie. It's all white men, white shirts out there trying to solve the problems versus like Hidden Figures. There's lots of newer movies that have a lot more diversity and show STEM is important to minorities as well as females out there. A podcast I started listening to is the STEM Everyday Podcast. It just focuses on teachers and how they infuse STEM into their classrooms. So it's interviews with teachers. The episode that I found really interesting was about, his name was Tim Needles, but he's an art teacher that integrates STEM into his art room. Spends a lot of time talking about, art were made for STEM. There's a lot of problem solving, creativity, design, even engineering. Creating lessons to hook the students for success. He talks about, he does a lot of work in cardboard, which I do in my art room. He does a cardboard chair, which I found interesting, is that students have to design a cardboard chair that supports the weight of a person. And he also gives points for that artistic side for being creative with their designs. It's not just about function. It's also about the aesthetics of the design. And finally, the Lancaster Science Factory. I live right down the street from them, and I think it's a great place. It's probably for younger students, more K-8. They have lots of hands-on experiences there for children, for students to go into and do. They've also started hosting, with the pandemic that we're in, they started hosting an outreach program where they have a lot of educational programs, links to go to different places. They had stuff where you could build a lightsaber. They went to the Dyson Foundation, which is the vacuum cleaner, has a lot of engineering type projects for people to do while they are at home with their students. I found it funny, on their homepage was their, I guess it was their Twitter account, where they have one of those arches that the kids have to put together. So he showed that you could create the same arch with Pringles. So it's kind of fun. Here's my 4 STEM resources. I hope you found them informational, and have a great day.